Hi, everybody. Brianna Whitney here, host of True Crime AZ Live. Thank you so much for joining me for the show this week. There is so much to talk about, and I'm excited for the show. It's the first time we've ever had two live guests. We're going to get to them for two different cases. I also interviewed two former U.S. attorneys about the big Luigi Mangione case. I'm sure a lot of people watching this know that case. We're going to talk about it all, but of course, all eyes have been on the Charlie Kirk assassination and the arrest and the details on the suspected shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. That is where we begin tonight in our first segment, the big case tonight. Okay, so we learned so much in this last week about what unfolded last week with Charlie Kirk. And obviously, there's been such tense moments online, on social media, and just with everything that's unfolded in the aftermath of this. But from a true crime perspective, I've really been focusing on the shooter himself and what the Utah County Attorney and the FBI has released in terms of details. So here's what we know so far on Tyler Robinson. He is facing aggravated murder, which is death penalty eligible in Utah. Interestingly enough, Utah, one of the only states that still has the firing squad. So he could die by firing squad if convicted and sentenced to death. We also know that his DNA was found on multiple things at the crime scene. We're talking the weapon, the casings, and even a screwdriver that was left on the roof there where you saw that video of him running to get away. This was an interesting investigation. We know for the first couple days that it would be like the FBI would release information. Hey, we have a person of interest. We have somebody in custody. They're not the shooter. Now they're let go. And so there was definitely this tension there in the first couple days where people really didn't know what was going on and who was responsible for this. And they put out surveillance photos, surveillance video and surveillance photos from that video saying, hey, do you recognize this person? And it was Tyler Robinson who was in those pictures. Now, who recognized him? His own parents. And that's something that we learned from the press conference earlier, and then the court documents. Actually, both his dad and his mom recognized him and thought, that looks weird. That looks like our son. They confirmed their suspicions with each other. And then they went and confronted Tyler. Tyler then told them, according to court documents, that he was going to take his own life, but they convinced him to turn himself into a sheriff's deputy friend that lived nearby. What you're seeing on your screen right now are text messages that come into play and are a huge part of this case, something I don't think we expected to get in this case. So I'm going to take you through these text messages because when the Utah County Attorney went through them, it really detailed what Tyler allegedly did in the hours and even minutes after he reportedly shot and killed Charlie Kirk. So let's go through them kind of one by one because I think this is now going to be the crux of the case. So allegedly, Tyler confessed to this crime to his roommate. In the county attorney's press conference, they said that Tyler was dating his roommate who was transitioning from a man to a woman. So right then and there, we could see that he's part of the LGBTQ community, and we know that Charlie Kirk has conservative views. So that kind of came into play pretty quickly. He then, according to the court documents, texted his roommate and said, drop everything, look at the note I left under the keyboard. That note said, I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I'm going to take it. So the roommate starts texting back and is like, what? You're joking, right? Like, this can't be you. Tyler says, I did it. I am. I'm sorry. You can see it here on your screen. You weren't the one who did it, right? I am. I'm sorry. So they go through some of these text messages, and then the roommate asks Tyler, why did you do this? And he said, pointing to Charlie Kirk, I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. Well, the roommate then asked, how long did he plan this? How long had he been planning this? He said a bit over a week, I believe. And these text messages go back and forth. He starts, though, telling his roommate how he needs to go get the rifle that he left in the woods, that he was concerned about this rifle. He had meant to go back and get it. But then, as everything obviously unfolded, police surrounded the area. They cordoned it off and he couldn't get back to get it. He was worried that they would find that would have his DNA on it, which it did. But it's odd. He talks about this rifle in a way that is so strange in these text messages to the roommate. He says his dad's going to kill him if he doesn't bring back the rifle. It was a gift to him, his grandpa's old rifle, a new gift to him. And he even texts the roommate and says, judging from today, I'd say grandpa's gun does just fine. I don't know. So you can obviously see there, he's focusing on the fact that the shot killed Charlie Kirk. He also mentioned in these text messages to the roommate that his father was diehard MAGA. And it's odd. I mean, from somebody looking at these text messages, it was strange that he was kind of implicating himself with all these very specific facts right after the shooting. The roommate is not the only one that he texted. He told the roommate, delete all of this. We don't want this, going out to authorities. And so that's why he is also facing charges of tampering with witnesses or witness tampering, asking the roommate to delete all that. Obviously, authorities still had access. But in addition to the roommate, he also was on Discord. Now, Discord's where you can have these group chats. And so he was in this chat with about 20 people. And it seems based on his conversation that this was a chat he would engage in pretty often, like a group of people who would come and talk about X, Y, and Z. So in this chat around the same time, he's messaging them saying, hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this. He goes on to say, I'm surrendering through a sheriff friend in a few moments. Thanks for all the good times and laughs. You've been so amazing. Thank you all for everything. So they see that and they're thinking, wait, he didn't actually do this, right? Like he didn't actually do this. He's joking, right? He's joking. So much so that one of the Discord chat friends comments back and says, whatever you do, don't go to a McDonald's anytime soon, referencing Luigi Mangione, who is the suspect for the UnitedHealthcare CEO ambush, who was caught in a McDonald's. Responding to that, Tyler Robinson said, better also get rid of this manifesto and exact copy rifle I have lying around. So he's kind of making a joke, making light of the situation, but obviously is also implicating himself in saying like, well, I have the gun and I did this and I wrote about this and I did this. It was all me. Not apologetic whatsoever for the actual shooting itself, but apologetic to seemingly everybody else he was telling about it, the Discord friends and his roommate, the person that he was dating. Tyler Robinson did appear virtually in court this week, didn't say much. We really learned most of our information from that county attorney presser that really revealed so much. But I do want to bring in one of our live interviews, and we do have people watching live. So if you have questions, please post to YouTube or Facebook so we can answer them for you. I want to bring in a former FBI Special Agent Ken Williams. Ken, I know you and I have had some conversation back and forth over the years due to just different cases, but I just want to give people a little bit of your background and why I wanted to reach out to you about this. You've been 30 years with the Bureau. You were heavily involved in the Oklahoma City bombing. I got to know who you are because you wrote the Phoenix Memo, which became very famous during and after 9/11. The Phoenix Memo being about that there were students from the Middle East coming here and learning how to fly, but not learning how to land. Something you sent the FBI headquarters, 2 months before 9/11 happened? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Yeah. July 10th, 2001.
July 10th, 2001. And that's obviously become a huge debate, discussion over these past years as to, had they acted more on that, would 9/11 have been prevented or had been changed? So that's where a lot of people may recognize you and your name over these years because of your work on that. So when we're talking the FBI involved in this case, I thought who better to go to than Ken to answer some of the questions I have and maybe a lot of the questions that so many of our viewers have as we've watched this unfold. Ken, I want to start with this. That county attorney presser was interesting to me. And it was interesting to a lot of people because we got so much detail. But that's the part that was interesting to me. To reveal all of those text messages, the ins and outs of every little detail, that is typically not something we get until trial. Do you think there was a strategy as to why they revealed so many intricate details in this case before that?
Well, I don't know if there was a particular strategy, but I was very impressed with Attorney Jeff Gray's release of the information, the charges, and the evidence supporting the individual charges. In 30 years plus of law enforcement, because before I was with the FBI, I was with the San Diego Police Department, California, I've never seen a county attorney or a U.S. attorney outlay a case so succinctly, so professionally. I think it could have been done for many reasons. I think this is just my professional opinion, maybe to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories right up front, maybe, you know, get the information, get the facts out there, say we got this under control. I think it was also a very good example of the surge that law enforcement, both federal, state, and county and local, brought upon the case to get all that information in as fast a manner as we did. I mean, the evidence against this young man is tremendous, you know, and that doesn't mitigate the fact that he could have other charges coming against him from the federal government down the road under domestic terrorism charges.
Right, right. Something that's odd, and you mentioned conspiracy theories. One of the things I've seen online is people suspicious of the fact that he wrote so much in such a short amount of time after Charlie was killed in these text messages like, I did this, here's why I did it, here's when I planned it, my dad is diehard MAGA, here's where I left the rifle, like all of these things. Some people have gone the conspiracy theory route on that. From your perspective, why would somebody reveal those things in writing to somebody close to them? Do you think that there's a certain kind of mindset that he was going through at the time?
Well, I'm certainly not in the individual's mind. He's obviously got a sick mind. But I mean, anything's open right now. I mean, what the FBI is doing right now, in conjunction with our state and local counterparts, is doing some digital forensics on the computer systems, his cell phone, his laptop computers, his gaming systems. You know, we're going to be looking at the social communication app Discord, everything that he's done on that. We're going to try to identify everybody, and I mean everybody, that he's been in contact with via these devices. And the FBI has some very unique tools that we bring to this, and we will be thorough. We will leave no stone unturned, and we will go out and actually talk. I'm not saying just the FBI, but our law enforcement partners with us, to every single person that he's been in touch with and organization. You know, my primary area of expertise with the bureau was international terrorism, groups like Hamas, Al Qaeda, Al Qaeda Islamiyah, stuff like that. But what we saw was a lot of youth back in those days, before 9/11, and even to the current day, would get radicalized online by looking at certain websites. So the FBI is going to spend some time looking at his social media footprint to see if he was on any websites that espoused this leftist, fascist, anti-fascist, anti-MAGA, anti-gay, transgender ideologies, to see if maybe he was being somebody was fueling the fire. So I know that's a fact. We'll be doing that. We're very good at that, and we'll get answers to that.
Yeah, something that you highlighted was just how fast we learn everything, but just the FBI's role in the digital forensics, the resources. It can take sometimes months in a case to get forensics back. When the president of the United States is heavily involved like this, where he's saying, we got to get him, we got to do this. What happens behind the scenes with the FBI? Is that like a all hands on deck, no matter where you are, get on this investigation now, and let's kind of throw most of our resources this way?
Yes, I believe the Director Patel did a great job in surging the resources of the FBI to assist state and local agencies. I mean, this is definitely a very unique situation, given the fact of who Mr. Kirk was, his relationship to the president, the vice president, and those within the Republican Party, the MAGA community. So obviously that did get some juice, But it is all hands on deck. I have my contacts within the bureau still, and they said, they have. These are younger guys. I was around for a long time, and they said they hadn't seen it, quite frankly, in their career, the speed at which they were, moving on this case to solve it. So, but I think that in the future, going forth, we would see the current director move as fast on other matters as well. It wouldn't have to be a prominent individual like Mr. Kirk. And I want to say my thoughts and condolences go out to the Kirk family. I pray for them right now. These are very difficult times for them, and I can't even imagine what they're going through. So I just want them to know, if they're watching it, that people like myself are thinking of them and praying for them.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, especially, all over the country, but here in Arizona too, people knew the Kirk family, and personally knew the Kirk family. So I know a lot of people are grieving that loss, and understandably so. I want to ask you, this is something, and I'm sure you've seen this evolve over the course of your career, but there was some criticism of the FBI at first with what Kash Patel was putting out on Twitter versus what was going on then behind the scenes. And then like having somebody and then not having somebody in custody, it's the wrong person twice. What do you make of that in terms of getting information out to the public? But is it like we want to be out there quickly, but versus correct? That's
Well,
tough.
in my opinion, Brianna, I mean, I think we have to be very measured before we make statements like that. We have to make sure we have our ducks in the row, that we're not giving the public misleading information.
Yeah.
I mean, let the investigation unfold. They always do, and it'll take a lot of tips and turns before you get to the answer. I still have questions about that whole sequence of events at the crime scene, and this is where again, looking at from a possible organizational involvement with this, like some leftist group or whatever, like armed queers in Utah or Antifa, like were some of these, the guy who admitted responsibility right off the bat, was he
Yeah.
part of something? Were the question askers about, how many transgender shooters have there been just before Mr. Kirk got killed? I mean, was that also something going on there? I don't believe in coincidences, but until we got to look at all those facts. We got to go through all those people, those people in particular that asked the question about transgender shooting, and then the guy who wanted to turn himself over and said he did it. Are they part of something, or was it a coincidence? And was the man who surrendered and said he did it just a nut job? I do know from other cases that I've worked. I mean, there's a term for it. I'm not a psychologist or a doctor, but I did run into this in at least one occasion in the Oklahoma City bombing case, actually, where somebody in Kingman actually said that they were involved in it when they had nothing to do with it at all. And it was just a person with a mental problem. But we have to investigate it all before,
Right.
in my opinion, we might make any public announcements.
Yeah, I mean, so many people have brought up that same point. The question that was asked right before is such odd timing. Clearly, there's still more of this investigation to be done. Just because Tyler Robinson's in custody doesn't mean it's over. Ken, I want to take some social comments, questions while you're on with us, in case there's anything
Sure.
that you can answer. Let's see, we have. It feels weird to me. The roommate, a girlfriend, had no idea about this. That's from my sister. Thank you, Alyssa. Ken, that is a good point, though, and I do want to ask you that. The roommate does play an odd part in this case, because the roommate is the one that had all those damning text messages. But are they going to fully investigate the roommate to the fullest extent on this?
Absolutely, and if I would suggest to you that they probably already have, and that his cooperation is not a willing cooperation, so to speak, as much as they're going to go easy on him and with criminal charges. I mean, my understanding is that his boyfriend Robinson, called him, contacted him shortly after, messaged him shortly after the murder, and was asking him to delete certain things from the digital things, and to not talk to police.
Yeah.
So therefore he was charged with obstruction of justice. But in doing so, though, Mr. Twig should have picked up the phone and called the police and said, "Hey, look, and I'm living with a guy who just told me he killed Mr. Kirk." I mean, in not doing so, that's a crime. So I would suspect, without having that inside knowledge, that that's what they're holding over his head. You either cooperate with us, or we're going to come hard on you for misprison of felony, or being an accessory after the fact, and charge him hard.
Yeah.
So, but I certainly think they're going to go through him very, very much so. I think they're both going to look at, or the FBI is going to look at both their social media platform, their footprint. If they were on any of these pro gay transgender site that expose a violent outlook on things, not that there's wrong with any people wanting to live that type of lifestyle, but if they're being radicalized to take action, violent action, to oppose those who oppose them, then that becomes a domestic terrorism investigation.
And that's when you say
and then the
more
FBI is going
charges.
on a whole different. The FBI is moving in a whole different direction. And I can see it's going to take the Department of Justice working with the Utah County Attorney's Office to figure out the prosecutorial stages of this thing. Obviously, the state's got their ducks in a row right now, moving forward on state charges. I'm sure the federal government and Attorney General Bondi, working with Director Patel, is putting together a federal case as well.
Yeah. Ken, we're looking at some comments on here that are popping up. Some people saying so heartbreaking for many, even the killer's parents who had to make
Oh,
the
yeah.
choice to turn him in. I mean, I think a lot of people commending the parents, but then we also had other people who were talking about um, the fact that there are a large chunk of people condoning the violence because
Yeah.
of their viewpoints. What do you make of the aftermath of the fact that you've got the parents who did the right thing, an unimaginable position for them to be in, but you have people so split on saying, depending on how they felt about Charlie personally, did you expect that kind of rhetoric online in the aftermath here?
No, I didn't. I didn't. But one side of me, I didn't expect to see it. I've thought about it in the past because I know, he. You could see it. You can sense that he was rubbing a certain segment of society the wrong way. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I don't agree with the reaction to this. I mean, Mr. Kirk's message was spot on. He gave people a platform that disagreed with him to talk with him. I mean, and I mean, God, to take a guy out for allowing them to have their peace is just sick. I mean, we're a country that's in a world of hurt right now, in my humble opinion, Brianna. And I don't know how we correct it, but I mean, it's just like. In my field, when I was working the Islamic extremists, you get youthful people watching stuff online, and their heads are getting filled with hatred from these extremist Muslims from the Middle East, and then they perhaps have never been to the Middle East a day in their life, and maybe just converted to Islam. They know nothing about the true nature of a peaceful religion of Islam, right? And then they go out and they're wanting to blow things up. So I think the same thing applies here. You get young people that do nothing but sit behind a computer screen or a device and just suck this stuff in, and then they end up spewing hatred and then in this case actually going out and killing a person.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you stop that. That's I don't know if that's got to be legislated by Congress, what can be posted online. I know there's a whole free speech issues and stuff, but something needs to be done.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. Ken, I wanted to take one more question for you. As the investigation plays out, when could we see more evidence in the case? I agree with this question too, because do you think they're going to drop like little bits and pieces as they go, or can we not expect to see more until it would be, at trial when they would reveal these things?
Well, I think County Attorney Gray made the comment that this is not going to be a case where he's going to be talking to the media every day about this or every other day.
Yeah.
He's laid down the foundation of his case, the charges. I think he did a masterful job explaining the evidence behind each charge that he filed against Mr. Robinson, and I think he's gonna hold the rest close to his vest. I mean, there's so much more that's got to be done in a traditional crime scene case like this. I mean, some of the things that we have to do. I mean, law enforcement, if they haven't done it, I'm sure they have. They were doing neighborhood investigations. They were going out and talking to everybody where this guy was seen on his way to the crime scene. They're going to go and ask people to give them the security video footage from their homes to get more than just that TMZ video that we saw on TV with him limping down the street. We're going to get. They're probably got a half dozen or more videos in their possession already of him going from where he parked his vehicle to the crime scene and then back away from it. The fingerprint evidence. I mean, our crime scene investigators were fingerprinting everything on the way up to that rooftop. If he was touching the railways, if he was touching the walls, if he was touching the ledges when he was getting off, you've got all sorts of stuff. You got the witness statements, obviously, and statements from the parents. You got the statements from Mr. Twig. They're going to go out and they're going to interview people that he's been interacting with online and seeing if somewhere down the road he hasn't talked about committing an act of violence. I know he told his boyfriend or his lover that he had only been thinking about doing this for about a week and planned it for a week. So now we're going to have to go back and we're going to have to go looking at video footage for at least a week or two before the murder,
Yeah.
and see if he was in the area, casing the place, and all that type of stuff. So the investigation is just started. I mean, now you got to make these charges that the county attorney filed against him stick, and then we also have to look at, from a Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice standpoint, build a domestic terrorism case against this guy, or at least have it ready to go. Whether
Right.
or not the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Attorney General of the United States is going to file on him, that's up to them. That's not the FBI's job. Our job is to go out there and collect the evidence.
Yeah, I mean, you listing it out right there just goes to show how extensive this investigation is, and the overwhelming evidence in the case. I mean, there's so much direct evidence, circumstantial, forensic, digital, like it's got it all, and that's so much to go through.
And Brandy, you got to think he lived 266 miles away from the crime scene. So
Yeah.
agents and investigators are going to track all 266 miles. They're going to see where he stopped, if he stopped, did he meet with somebody along the way. There's so much that goes into these investigations. By the time this thing goes to trial, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of pages of documentation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way these things go.
It's so extensive, and then not to mention a capital case, a death penalty case. Those in and of themselves are much bigger cases, take longer to play out in a courtroom too. Just to get there, it's typically years. Then you get to the case itself, and that can play out for months and months in a courtroom, which I assume something of this magnitude would. Ken Williams, thank you so much for joining us live. Your expertise and what you bring to this, it's really appreciated on my end, and I know that the live viewers here too. It's a case that a lot of people care about, and you make a good point as we talk about all of this. Obviously, we're keeping the Kirk family top of mind as this is a very devastating loss. So I just appreciate your time live, and we hope to have you on the show again soon.
Yes, please. I'd like to. And thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Ken. You too. Appreciate it so
Bye-bye.
much. Thanks, everybody, for all your live questions as well and comments. Keep them coming because coming up next, I think it's the case that, honestly, more people want to talk about than anything. Luigi Mangione, the suspect accused of killing UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He was back in court this week. We've got new videos and new pictures of the suspect that people either hate or love. We're going to talk about these charges, what they mean, charges he got dropped. Stick around. If you are watching on YouTube, you probably see us behind the scenes here for about a minute. If you're watching on Roku, you'll see some ads here. So we'll be right back. See you in a sec. All right, we're back with our second segment tonight, True Crime AZ Live on the docket. We're talking Luigi Mangione, the suspect that so many people are fascinated with for a slew of reasons. Many people have become fans of Luigi. People hate Luigi. There's not much more I have to say on that because you know what I'm talking about. Luigi, the 27-year-old accused of killing UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside a New York hotel last year. You've probably seen that video, and a lot of people paying attention to the case ever since. Luigi back in court this week, but a win for his defense team. A New York State judge dismissing the state terrorism charges against Luigi, which means in New York now, for the state charges, he is only left with second-degree murder. Now, what does this all mean? What are we looking at here? What does this mean for the case? It has some implications, but there's quite a bit more to this case than people maybe even realize. You probably know who Luigi is, but you might not know that there are state and federal charges in this case. So the state of New York, had these terrorism charges actually gone through, that could have upped his sentence to a mandatory life sentence. But without the terrorism charges, if he were to be convicted of second-degree murder, which is what he's being charged with in New York, he would be looking at 25 years behind bars. However, the federal government has charged him with other charges. These include stalking, but it also includes a federal murder charge. That carries a possible death penalty sentence. And you're looking at video on your screen right now of Luigi in court this week. The newest photos and videos we have of him in his kind of beige jail smock, I don't know, whatever you want to call that. But Luigi was in court learning about this today or this week. And so was looking at this case kind of from a totality standpoint of, all right, we've seen the video of him allegedly lying in wait to shoot Brian Thompson. We know what went into this. We know about the investigation. How did we get to terrorism charges in the first place? I mean, I think we all know typically what a terrorism charge means, but when we're actually looking at it in a legal sense, they're typically brought against people who want to intimidate a certain population or impact a government and its decision making. So that didn't really seem to fit with, allegedly killing a CEO and shooting him. What did that have to do with one another? Well, I interviewed two former U.S. attorneys, Dennis K. Burke and Paul Charlton. Both of them served as U.S. attorney here in Arizona. And I was trying to get their take on everything with the case moving forward. But I asked both of them, okay, how do we get to terrorism charges in the first place? Like, where did that come from? Can you see at all why? And while they believe the judge was pretty particular this week about saying, yeah, that's not going to work, they could kind of see from a prosecutor's standpoint where they might have gone with terrorism. Take a listen.
But I would assume that the prosecutors looked at this and said he went after the top executive of a health insurance company because of the policies and how the company was operating. So from a prosecutor's perspective, it would be, this wasn't a family murder. This wasn't a financial dispute. This is someone he didn't even know. He went after him because of his status, and his status is the top executive of a major health company, a health insurance company. Insurance is a key word. So I assume that's what the prosecutors were thinking as to why they even took a chance at getting this past a judge. From the judge's ruling, it's pretty solid. He said, you don't have any evidence. You don't have evidence to indicate that this defendant was trying to inspire fear in the general population, or was trying to terrorize a government or the policy of a government.
A judge, I think, is politely but firmly told the prosecutors, you got it wrong here. And as I say, to their credit, the prosecutors have accepted the judge's decision and they're moving forward with the charge that remains.
Talk about those charges that remain. There is, it's not unheard of for there to be state and federal charges in a case. And you even heard Ken Williams referring to that possibly being the case with Tyler Robinson in the Charlie Kirk shooting, that we could see other charges like terrorism possibly tacked on from the federal government. That is not necessarily unheard of. What is odd is that both the states and the feds are charging Luigi Mangione with murder. That is typically like these jurisdictions will talk to each other and say, all right, you're going to take this charge or you're going to take this one. Never, at least in my career, have I seen somebody be charged with murder from both jurisdictions. And there might be a reason as to why. So in New York, I mentioned he's facing second-degree murder. And in talking to these past U.S. attorneys, both of them agree. Everyone's very confused with what New York is doing based on the fact that almost all of the evidence in this case seems to point to this being a planned attack. And so they both addressed this with me, why there might be two different charges, confusion as to what the state of New York is doing.
I'm as perplexed as you are by New York state criminal law. There's nothing more, premeditated than this. I mean, that's why the feds have a potential stalking charge. I mean, in other words, this wasn't a bar fight that resulted in a death. This wasn't an act of passion. This is incredibly planned out.
This was about as clear a premeditated act as you could imagine, right? There's a lot of, at least in the press and in the media, indication that he was literally waiting for this individual, had gone to the hotel, had planned to run into this individual and shoot him, execute him style. So that sounds like premeditation, which, as you know, is typically a first-degree murder charge. So it's unusual, striking to me that they didn't allege first-degree murder here in the state system. I suspect what happened was this was so high profile and so shocking and so unnecessary a death, murders and homicides are unnecessary, but this one in particular seems so much to capture the attention of everyone that it may be that both jurisdictions are thinking, in order to truly deter similar behavior in the future, we want to do both state and federal prosecution.
Talking to both of them, they're very much in agreement on that. I can tell you, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you based on what I know here in Arizona, there's no way that Luigi would have been charged with second-degree murder here. That easily would have been a first-degree murder charge here in Arizona. But that really does go to the point that these states really vary in how they handle cases. It's clear that the feds want the death penalty to be involved here. And I was looking at the death penalty in New York because had they filed a first-degree murder charge and had the death penalty been sought out for Luigi in the state of New York, I thought, well, I wonder how long it takes or how they go about the execution process there. Well, turns out the last time New York executed somebody was in 1963. So there was probably, I mean, I'd be willing to say almost a 100% chance that even if they did sentence Luigi to death in the state of New York, he never would have been executed. It is much different here in Arizona, though things have gone through shifts of being higher or lower in terms of executions. We still do them. We have one scheduled for next month. So it is really, really different state by state. Interestingly enough, in this case, there's going to be all eyes on this. We know this. From now all the way at every hearing until there is a trial in Luigi's case. Think about all the shows that you guys like, crime dramas, courtroom dramas. When you're in there, typically the most important thing that captivates people so much are opening statements. The state and the defense will lay out their cases, all their evidence that they have, what they're going to point to, why their client is either guilty or not guilty. And that's the part that really captivates everybody. I would argue typically that opening statements can be some of the most important parts of a trial. The part that as media we don't always pay as much attention to is jury selection. It's almost like, a little process that happens before that we monitor, but we're not going with our cameras live and everything until the actual trial begins with those opening statements. But in talking to Dennis Burke, he said in this case, jury selection may be the absolute most important part of this entire case, this entire trial for Luigi Mangione. Why? Because one or two jurors, depending on how they feel even about the healthcare system, could affect, could convince, could sway that jury from possible conviction to possible acquittal and everything in between, including a hung jury. And so when you're picking a jury, they give them a juror questionnaire, and those often involve questions like, do you believe in the death penalty? How do you feel about, X, Y, and Z? If let's say it's somebody that's in the LGBTQ community, they'll ask how you feel about that, as they're trying to weed out who they don't want on the jury and who each side wants on the jury. And so in this case, Dennis Burke was telling me, not only does he think this will be the most important part of this case, given the nature of it, but he actually gave us an idea of what he thinks will be on that juror questionnaire in terms of questions that they'll see.
As a defense counsel, you would look to see, during picking the jury, who can I get, that could basically hang a jury or make an argument in a jury deliberation as to why there should be acquittal. 100% guarantee that the questions to the potential jurors are going to be, have you had health insurance claims? You or anyone in your family? Are you a customer of UnitedHealth? B, have you ever had a claim denied? Have you ever had to appeal a claim? There's going to be intense amount of questions directed at that to figure out, we can't afford, the prosecution's going to look at that and say, we can't afford to have that individual picked, because all that's going through their mind is, my son had the same situation as this defendant. If I were a prosecutor on this team in this matter, I would have concern about the fact of how the public has reacted to this defendant and what he did, and how that's going to play out in front of a jury.
And they will probably be hard-pressed to find a jury that hasn't heard of this case, or at least doesn't have an opinion in this case. I think in this day and age, it's a lot harder to pick a jury for that reason, because people can see things on social media and have so much more access to things. If they weren't watching TV back in the day, or reading a newspaper, maybe they hadn't heard of the case at all. But of course now it's everywhere, no matter what app you're on. No trial dates have been set yet in either his federal case or his state case. His next court date is in December, so we've got a couple months before we'll see Luigi Mangione again, but you could call this a win for his defense team this week, getting those state terrorism charges dropped. Of course, we'll be following this case along with the rest of the country who's obsessed with this case as it plays itself out. Coming up next, we've got a crazy case unfolding here in Arizona. One of our reporters, Sarah Robinson, is standing by live to join us. She's been working on it. Crazy details you guys are about to hear, and it's all happening in real time. We'll be right back after this quick break. All right, our last case tonight, or our last segment tonight, criminal mindset. This is well named for this segment because it is crazy what is unfolding right now in court documents and what this suspect reportedly told police in this situation, this case that is unfolding out of Mesa, Arizona here. So I'm going to take you just through a little bit of the details here, and then we're going to bring in Sarah Robinson live. 22-year-old Lowell Tucker Dorn, who appears to go by Tucker in court, he is in custody now for 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder and burglary. Why? Because this man admitted to police that he went into a Mesa apartment that was unlocked and stabbed a mom and her 2 teen daughters. He did not know them. This was completely random, and that is so unheard of these days. We almost never hear of this being a random crime like this. So much so that police even thought like maybe the mom and the daughters had some sort of connection to him. Maybe there was something on social media. No, nothing. They were sleeping, and the details that have come out in this case today are very alarming, but also kind of heroic for this family. The mom and the 2 daughters allegedly fought back so much that's the only reason that all 3 of them are alive tonight with non-life-threatening injuries. But Dorn was allegedly able to stab all 3 of them. At one point, somebody hit him with a hammer trying to find anything that they could. They were able to wield the knife out of his hand, but that's when he grabbed an Xbox and hit one of them in the face. All 3 of them were stabbed. One of them was able to escape and ran about a mile, which I don't even know how she did this, ran about a mile to go get help and then call 911. That's when Dorn fled the scene and all 3 of them were taken to the hospital. Dorn was not in custody right away. There was a search for him. And when they finally did catch up with him and did get him in custody, here's what he told police. He told them that he is bipolar, he has borderline personality disorder, hasn't been taking his meds for months, and that he used PCP, which probably contributed to his assault. He told police that he randomly was trying to break into unlocked doors and admitted that he had had thoughts of harming others, had never carried them out before this, and that he had the intention of killing them in their home that night. A terrifying case. This is just absolutely crazy for this community. And he also, in the court documents, is noted as being transient. So he is homeless in the area. And so you're seeing video here, drone video of the area, the apartment complex where this happened in Mesa. I want to bring in our Arizona's Family reporter, Sarah Robinson, in live. She has been the reporter working on this case. Sarah, you were out in Mesa all day today. Kind of bring me through just the start of this yesterday I know we knew that this mom and the daughters were stabbed. We did not know all the details that we got today. Where has the investigation led, and what were you able to find out more about today?
Well, I think you said it really well right off the bat that this almost never happens, right? Like, usually when there is a stabbing or a violent crime of this nature, 9 times out of 10, that person will have known them in some capacity or was maybe planning to do this or something led to it. Not the case here. So initially, we were told that they didn't know the man. The victims didn't know this guy at all. And then, kind of off the record, which eventually they did admit that they thought it was possible that they knew him, but because of the time of the attack at 4:30 in the morning and the fact that they were sleeping, it was dark and they didn't get to actually see him. So they thought that maybe, yeah, they did know him. When they re-interviewed those victims at the hospital, they learned, oh gosh, yeah, this is truly random. Nobody knows him or anything about him. So I did get the chance to ask police today, because something that really caught my attention is they were very quick to say that they did not believe that there was a threat to the public, which, if there's not a threat to the public, that usually means that they do know him. But then they also were saying that they don't know him. So I asked about that today, because when they found him, it was from another 911 call on the Mesa Tempe border, which is a little bit away from where this happened. And someone called in to report that he was, again, checking door handles. So not sure if he planned to carry out another attack, but it is clear that maybe there was a really big threat to the community. So I was able to ask about that today to the police, and an officer told me, yeah, you make a good point there. So they also are going to rethink, it seems, how they convey the message to the public early on in an investigation.
Yeah. Do we know how long that time frame was between the actual attack itself and then when they did put him in handcuffs?
I'm not sure. That is another thing that we really wanted to get those details on, is like, how long were people actually really potentially in danger? Now, we do know that he left that knife in the apartment. He did not get out of the apartment with it. So it's unclear if he was armed. But again, he mentioned admittedly to police that he wanted to hurt and kill people, which is really alarming.
I was going to say, what do you make of his comments, especially the ones where he basically gives them a laundry list of his mental health medications and ailments and what he struggles with, and then is like, but I've had these thoughts for a long time. I mean, what did you make of that information? It was so forthcoming, but also rather odd.
Yeah, definitely rather odd. I mean, for the community, it's good that he was honest, because now police have more evidence to potentially get him behind bars. But it is really interesting. I mean, this is not something that typically happens where someone just flat out admits being prompted straight away. What was brought to my attention from residents that lived there is, this is someone that was not on their radar. This person, Tucker Dorn, did not have any sort of violent criminal history. So police had contact with him, or had contact with him in the past, because, as you mentioned, he was a transient person and he told them that. So they knew kind of who he was, and it didn't seem that anybody thought that he was capable of this. So people who live in that apartment complex are really concerned, because police did mention that the door was unlocked, or it maybe didn't lock. And that is something that people said there, that there's security concerns and potentially maintenance issues. I was there today, and the security gate does not close. We were there for a really long time yesterday. It was open all day. Granted, there was an active investigation, so maybe they had it open. But when I talked to residents, they said, yeah, no, it's always open. It's supposed to close, and it doesn't. And they've had other security issues there.
Gosh, and that would make a huge difference, too, in this case as well. One thing if you willingly leave your door unlocked, another thing if you can't lock it because it doesn't lock. You have to think that the apartment complex is going to end up looking at that. Are the people there like freaked out about other people doing something like this? I mean, it is rare that we see something to this degree, but also alarming if he was transient and maybe knew other transient people who lived in the area. Hard to think, like, could they have, talked about this, and would other people have that kind of ideology?
That's a great question. So I luckily stumbled upon the girl who lives right across from where this happened. And thankfully, she wasn't there at the time. But when I told her it was random, she was completely shocked. She was like, oh my goodness, thank God I wasn't there. I don't know what I would have done if he had tried to do this to me. But she accidentally saw the crime scene because she lived right across it. And they had opened a door trying to bring some forensic evidence out, and she saw the blood, and she described it as the most gruesome thing she has ever seen. And so they're all really freaked out. Could this happen again, or will this happen again if security issues aren't addressed? And I should also note that this happened near Broadway and Dobson in Mesa. Police did tell me today that that area is pretty high crime for them. So that young woman that I spoke to does plan to move to a better location solely because of this incident.
Yeah, and we're seeing a comment here. It seems so rare that it's a stranger. I mean, that's a great point here. There's another big case in Arizona out of Scottsdale where a woman was killed by a alleged stranger as well. That's about to go to trial in a few months, but that also happened back in 2015. And that's how rare it is. We don't see this all the time. There's almost always something, or like it's there's nefarious activity that's going on, and if people come together, even if they're strangers, there was something that went wrong, and they put themselves in that situation. That is just not the case here. I had some people ask me about a possible insanity defense here. He said he was off his meds. He said he had borderline personality disorder, has bipolar disorder, was on PCP at the time. Like, would that be an insanity defense or not? And my immediate reaction is no, this would not be insanity. And here's why. Drugs, typically, people will do them, but that doesn't constitute an insanity defense. And bipolar and borderline personality disorder, we see suspects that have that all the time. And defense will definitely use that as a mitigating factor for mental health, but that is never used to prove insanity. They must prove that they did not know what they did at the time was wrong. And in his statement to police, I believe he is definitely saying he knows right from wrong. He's saying, I've had this intent to kill people. And harm people. I've never done it until now, but I had the intention to kill them because I was on the PCP. That's probably why I carried this out. To me, that is an admission of knowing that what he did was wrong. And I don't think that any sort of insanity would hold up in court. But Sarah, you actually have quite an extensive knowledge on psychology. It's something you enjoy looking at and researching, and you've reported a lot on it as well. What do you make of the fact that he willingly told police that he's bipolar and has borderline personality disorder? And that is also, those are two things, especially the personality disorder, that we see in a lot of killers or suspected killers.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point that it could be a mitigating factor, but something that really doubles down on the fact that I do not think insanity is on the table here at all is that he knew he had these diagnoses, right? There's 4 of them. Yet he also admitted that he hadn't been taking his medication for the past 4 months. So with bipolar, people can swing one way or the other. They can go towards mania, which is psychosis most often. And that's where you see religious delusions or paranoid ideation, where people think that the government is after them. It could also swing in the other direction towards depression. And usually at that point, people are a lot less able to carry on with their day-to-day functions. BPD is interesting because it's a personality disorder, but it typically does not mean that somebody loses contact with reality, which means that the reality testing is very much still intact. They know what they're doing and typically why they're doing it. Sometimes they can't control their anger as much, but they still know right from wrong and what's real and what isn't real. So if he had these diagnoses and he was prescribed medication, which bipolar is actually very highly treatable, even if you have psychosis, it's still very highly treatable. If you go off your medication, though, willingly, that is then your responsibility to manage your illness, especially if you know about it and you have flipped from one way to the other in the past. So I think it's possible that he was in some sort of episode. Of course, PCP can induce psychosis as well, but if he willingly took that, then insanity is not on the table. And he admitted that he had these urges to hurt and kill people. He just hadn't acted on them previously. So to me, it sounds like all of his reality testing was still intact, and it does not, to me, sound at all like insanity is on the table.
for all that analysis too. I mean, I know you're passionate about psychology, and that's why I like to ask you about it, because you study this, you do a lot of research even on your own time. So I think it's good for people to kind of understand what goes into those different personality disorders and how that can actually play a part when it becomes a legal factor versus not. And in this case too, something that's going to be unique, and thank God for this, all 3 of them survived. So this could have been so much worse. We could have had 3 dead women. And so when it comes to trial, you are going to have the state, of course, their star witnesses are going to be all 3 of these victims who thankfully will be alive to testify in this case. So we'll definitely see how this plays out. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on live. Great work. We appreciate all the reporting and all the insight you've given us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for watching the show tonight. We'll have a big show again next week. I appreciate your questions, comments. Make sure to go follow True Crime AZ live on Instagram and TikTok. Follow me on YouTube. We'll be posting different clips from this, and I love interacting with you guys, even after the fact too. I love interacting with you guys live in the show, but I also like talking to people on social media who want to comment on these cases after. Appreciate everything. We'll be back next week. Everybody have a great rest of your week, and thanks for watching True Crime AZ live. Good night.